Welcome to Let's Talk Mental Health, where we bring awareness to the causes and solutions of mental health conditions. I'm your host, Nathan Nedley, and we are in our final part of a 5-part series on the depression hit categories. I'm here with Dr. Neil Nedley, and we are looking at two more, the two final ones. Let's get started with the frontal lobe hit. What is a frontal lobe hit?
This is something that adversely affects the ability of the analytical portion of our brain to function well. And that's what we call the prefrontal cortex. This is the area of the brain that actually makes us human beings. This is why we can accomplish advanced planning and thinking. This is why we're spiritual beings as well. There's a reason why you never see dogs and cats flocking to a worship service. They don't have the frontal lobes to be able to worship. But humanity that has a frontal lobe worships. And of course the difference might be who they're worshiping, what they're worshiping, but if they have a frontal lobe, they are indeed able to worship. And this area of our brain turns out to be a crucial part of being able to be mentally healthy. Because if our frontal lobes are suppressed, then our lower brain or our limbic system takes over and we end up becoming managed by our emotions instead of managing our emotions. And so the frontal lobe actually helps us to get ourselves out of anxiety and depression if it's well functioning. But in most people's case that have depression and anxiety, it has become near dormant, or at least way down in its ability to function. And this is a primary focus of our program, is enhancing this front portion of the brain so that the real human being can come back.
Is this a hit that is easily reversible? Is there, if say your frontal lobe is under suppression, is it relatively easy to reverse that, or is it not the case at all?
Well, it actually is easy if we pay attention and get rid of the things that are suppressing it and then start to participate in things that will enhance it. It doesn't take long for it to start coming back. We'll start seeing a difference within 7 days in people's abilities to utilize their frontal lobe and how much frontal lobe circulation is doing. And they will continue to uptick beyond that week. And their frontal lobe can improve week by week for months until about 20 weeks, and then we can kind of maximize that in.
Wow. So what are ways that someone can enhance their frontal lobe?
One of the ways is actually participating in analytical material and analyzing things. One of the ways we do this in our program is actually teaching the people the 10 different ways of distorted thinking. There's 10 hits, and for the frontal lobe part, there's 10 different ways that we can think in irrational, distorted ways. Once we start recognizing those 10 ways and catching ourselves in it, analyzing our thoughts for distortions, identifying that distortion, correcting that distortion, it's actually a frontal lobe exercise. And it actually starts to enhance the frontal lobe of the brain. Another thing we can do is reading the book of Proverbs, reading the book of Daniel, looking at what turned disappointments into appointments, looking for spiritual keys that do this. This is one of the things we do in our residential program because Daniel is loved by everybody. It's where we got the scientific method from, was from Daniel, so the scientists all love Daniel. The Christians love Daniel, the Muslims have monuments to Daniel, the Jews love Daniel. So it's a very non-sectarian book, and it's one that has some powerful ability to help our frontal lobe to improve as we look at the stories and analyze those stories and see how disappointments went into appointments. Music therapy can help. Music that is structured, melodious, that is interesting and beautiful, non-dissonant harmonies, what we call consonant harmonies. This is very healthy for the frontal lobe, and we'll utilize this as well to enhance the frontal lobe.
What about suppressants or suppressors to the frontal lobe?
There's quite a few suppressants, more than there ever has been in human history, but entertainment television actually suppresses our frontal lobe. It's been well documented in multiple studies, and it starts doing that about 3 minutes into watching your favorite television program.
It doesn't take long.
Doesn't take long, and of course it's not only during the time, but the after effects also are manifest afterwards. So this is a very common frontal lobe suppressant, music that is heavy in the rhythm, in syncopated rhythm in particular. Can start enhancing the frontal lobe also within about 1.5 to 3 minutes after it's being listened to. And this can actually decrease our ability to be calm under stress. It can decrease our actual joy and happiness and the simple pleasures in life just by suppressing this area of the frontal lobe. And so, yes, we have people stop their frontal lobe suppressant behavior, and we replace it with frontal lobe enhancing behavior, and what a difference that starts making. As mentioned, in as little as a week, we'll start to see it.
Wow. The second thing we're talking about is addiction. That's the last hit that we're focusing on, and I'm guessing that frontal lobe, or the frontal lobe has a significant role to play in the addiction hit. Do you want to speak about what that role is and how you go about dealing with addiction in your practice?
Yeah, well, anyone who has an addiction is succumbing to that addiction even though they know it's unhealthy for them, it's a sign that they need more frontal lobe enhancement, because they're not going to be able to manage themselves or overcome that addiction without the frontal lobe starting to enhance in circulation and activity. But addictions in and of themselves will start to suppress the frontal lobe as well.
I see.
And so, first people do the addiction in order to try to get high, but the longer they do it, the less high they become. And pretty soon they're just doing it to get numb, because in between times they feel this deep, distressing sense of deprivation, even though there's nothing bad going on in their life. And it's kind of a sad state of existence. People that have addictions, if we take a look at their dopamine activity in their brain, their dopamine activity is far lower than a healthy person with no addictions. Right. And a lot of people think, well, this healthy person, how is he being happy? Because he seems to be happy with just simple things, going out for a walk, he's happy with that. Having a nice meal, he's happy with that. Listening to good music, he's happy with that. Where a person with addictions, they can't get very happy with those type of things. They might feel slightly better, but overall they're still really down because their dopamine activity is so low as a result of repeatedly utilizing their addiction of choice. And so this is why it's so crucial to get those people off of their addictions. And of course, we prepare people when they come to our program. We let them know, this is a program that's going to have you get off those addictions, so it might be good for you to start getting off them even beforehand so you don't have as much of withdrawal symptoms. And then there may be addictions like alcohol that if they're really heavy users, we can't necessarily stop that all at once without replacing it with something else to prevent alcohol withdrawal seizures. We might do that with benzos as well. We try to wean them slowly off of the benzos. Those are very addictive drugs and they're frontal lobe suppressants. But if we took them off abruptly, they would have seizures and they would maybe even go into psychosis and hallucinations and end up in the hospital. And so we have to do some of these addictions on a more careful basis. Right. But most addictions, they're able to quit through the cold turkey method, and when their frontal lobe starts enhancing, they realize they can actually stay off it, and they'll end up far happier with much better dopamine activity with no addictions.
Well, I was going to ask you, because it's kind of a classic chicken and the egg situation. You're dealing with an addiction that's suppressing your frontal lobe, but to overcome the addiction, you need your frontal lobe. So do you typically, attack bringing back the frontal lobe as much as possible in dealing with addiction, or just focusing on removing the addiction and waiting for the frontal lobe to reactivate, so to say?
Yeah, well, that's a very great question, and it actually goes back to what type of addiction. For the benzos, we'll work on enhancing their frontal lobe first before we take them off the benzos, because they're not going to do well at all unless their frontal lobe is enhanced. But if it's something like tobacco, that's something that can be stopped abruptly. And so we would, take care of that right on day one before the frontal lobe even has a chance to be enhanced. And they'll do far better after the frontal lobe is enhanced, but they're in an environment now with us where it's just going to be far easier to get rid of that, have it be the cold turkey method. We know there's going to be nicotine withdrawal. We'll be able to handle it with all the other things we're doing. They'll be able to get over it a lot easier in our program than doing it at home.
Right.
And every program we have people highly addicted to nicotine that get over it, and they're just shocked at how easy it is.
Wow. And that's just removing the addiction, quitting cold turkey.
Quitting cold turkey in a supportive environment that's going to help brain chemistry.
Right. And then working to strengthen the frontal lobe and
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for going over this 5-part series with us, Dr. Nedley. This was our 5th part. If you missed any of the other ones or didn't see all of them, you can check our YouTube channel and go back and rewatch or watch for the first time any of those 5 parts that go over the 10 depression hit categories. This is Let's Talk Mental Health. I'm your host, Nathan Nedley, and as always, stay healthy, live happy.